Hello, guys. How are you doing? So it's already 8 and 5 minutes. However, since you are only three, we're going to give your classmates a few more minutes to let them join the meeting. So let's wait, and I'll see you in a few minutes. Hey guys, how are you doing? So I think we waited long enough, maybe more than what we really should. And there's only six of you that joined the meeting. So yesterday I was not able for class because, as I told you, I had a patient that needed a lot of attention. Um, so I apologize for that. Uh, However, I know that you will all understand because you're all going to be doctors and you are going to have this kind of patients eventually, right? So I'm sorry, guys, for yesterday's inconvenience. So we're going to have the class today. We're not going to have practice class today because we're missing some some topics that we are supposed to talk about, and actually we have a lot of topics to talk about until the end of the first level. Okay, so today we're going to talk about DI, which is the next one. I'm going to start sharing my screen. Let me know if you are able to see it. Okay, you see it, right?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So let's get started. So today's topic will be DI. So as the infographics that you already have from our coordinator, there are a lot of organs or maybe systems that are written down. However, you know that this is quite a lot of information about each one, right? We cannot talk about the eye and all the diseases that are related to this kind of structure. So we're going to talk about some other parts of the eye that we didn't talk about in the first class. We that was actually supposed to be about the parts of the body. We did talk about the eye. However, we are going to go deeper inside this structure. Okay, so let's get started. Well, this is just an overview of the anatomy of the eye. So here we have notice pronunciation, cornea, right? Pupil, iris, lens, conjunctiva, okay, retina, and the optic nerve. This is just an overview. We're going to take a closer look to each one of these structures. Actually, we're going to talk about some structures and how these specific structures are related to some diseases, okay? So as you know, the human eye is a structure that has different kind of tissues, right? And part of them are specialized and have some properties. Mm, one of them is refraction. You can anybody tell me what refraction is, or does anybody know about refraction? In Spanish, refracción, right?
It's like a mirror.
It's well, a mirror is something like the in which the light beams. bounce, right? They bounce back. It goes directly from the object this light is coming from, right? That could be a mirror, right? However, refraction is actually an it would be a transparent object, okay, through which the light goes through, okay. So it would be kind of different from a mirror, right? Because when we were talking about the mirror, we already said that this light beams, it's like they're bouncing back, right? And bounce means rebotar, right? So they bounce back. On the other hand, refraction, this phenomenon, which is refraction, the light beams go through this object. However, when they are on the other side of the object, they change its direction. Okay, so it's easy. Uh, Refraction, we relate refraction to a verb actually, which is deflect. Okay, can anybody tell me what deflect is? Okay, someone's writing in our chat. Is it is like pencil? Yeah, yes, that would be close to what we're talking about. Yeah, your classmate wrote something that, yeah, could be. It's like when you put a pencil, she's given us this example, right? You put it down the surface, and when you see it, it's like it is the pencil, the half that is under the water changes direction, right? Okay, that would be an example. Another example, uh, we have this structure. We have in DI, we have two structures that are related to deflection of the light. Okay, this is the most powerful one, the cornea. Okay, the cornea, and the other one, which is also important, however, it has less refraction power, is the lens. Oh, sorry, I'm going to. Okay, so here we have the cornea, right? And this one is the lens. So both the structures, cornea and lens, are related to the deflection of the light beams. So a light beam goes this way, for example, and it when it passes through the cornea and through the lens, changes the direction. For example, a straight light beam coming this way straight would change direction to focus on a structure that we are going to talk about later on. So deflection, for you to understand in Spanish, would be desviar. Desviar. Okay, to deflect is to desviar. So they deviate or deflect the light beam through its pass through this both structures, cornea and lens, and focus this light beam into one structure that we are going to talk about later on. So that is the refraction. Okay, changes direction when passes through some structures. We're going to talk about refraction we're going to talk about this phenomenon with more details later on also, okay? So as a simple concept, we're going to leave it there, okay? For you to understand. And did anybody not get what this is about? Okay, so they focus the light beams, right? As we were talking, and focus this light beam into the retina, into a certain point actually. So, okay, someone just joined in. So this tissue, which is the retina, okay, the light beam goes through these both structures, and this deflection of the light beam makes the light beam focus on the one point of the retina, and this is extremely specialized tissue which turns the luminous stimulation into electric stimulation. Okay, so, well, I think all of you already had the in your anatomy class. Here we have the retina, which are actually going to focus on one point, which is going to become into the optic nerve, right? Which is a cranial nerve. In Spanish, par craneal, right? Nervio craneal, par craneal, which is this one, the optic nerve. So this the retina turns the luminous stimulation into an electric stimulation, which is transmitted into the optic nerve, which takes this stimulation right into the central nervous system, right through the optic nerves, both both nerves, right? Uh, and it is this stimulation is taken into the occipital lobe, right, which is related to the sight, right? So we're going to have we're not going to describe this well. There's an um, there's actually like a freeway, right? Starting from the optic nerve down to the occipital lobes. We're not going to talk about it. It, I think it's more related to neurology. So we're going to focus on the eye, okay? At least today, if you, at the end of the class, we're going to take a look at the infographics for you to decide what uh, diseases you would like to talk about, because we cannot talk about all of all the diseases. For example, in cardiology, right, it would be a ton of diseases. So we're going to focus on the ones that you might like to know about. Okay, at the end of the class we're going to talk about it. So focusing on today's topic, we could divide all these structures of the human eye in three main layers. Okay, all these structures that you are seeing right now can be divided into three main layers. And here we have all of these layers. We have an external or outer or fibrous layer, okay, which is composed by these two structures, the cornea and the sclera, okay. We have a middle layer, also known as vascular layer, or simply uvea, okay? This middle layer or vascular layer actually has three main components, which are the iris, the ciliary body, and the choroid, okay? Now, I think you all know this, focus on pronunciation. And here we have an internal layer, also known as inner layer, just like outer layer, we have an inner layer. Okay, someone just joining. And it is also known as neural, okay, neural layer, which is composed by one main structure, which is the retina. Okay, so we have these three main layers. Um, so we're going to talk about each one of these layers. Here we have a cross section of the eye, right? Just the way we would look at the eye in a CT, right? A CT is a tomography, right? A computed tomography. We would see, we would take a look at the eye if this way, if we were seeing a CT. So here we have the three main layers. the external, which is the fibrous layer, the medium layer, which is the vascular, and the internal or inner or neural layer, which is the most internal one, right? So uh, let's go on. So we're going to get started with the external or fibrous layer, which we already said that it has two main components, which are the cornea and the sclera, okay? So this external or fibrous layer of the eye is constituted by the cornea and the sclera, and it creates a continuous layer which forms a structure that wraps the the whole eye, okay? And the limit between the cornea and the sclera, it's called limbus, right? Sclerocorneal limbus, okay? I don't know if I have, okay, no, I don't. Here on the top of the slide, here we have this like line, right? This black line. This would be actually the sclerocorneal limbus, okay? In Spanish would be limbo esclerocorneal, right? So the limit between cornea and sclera is the limbus, okay? Sclerocorneal limbus. Let's get started with the cornea. The cornea is the most anterior portion of the eye, and it's like 1/6 part of the fibrous layer. So it is a transparent tissue uh, with a great power of refraction. Okay, this is actually the most important structure when we're talking about refraction. Okay, so when we have some disease that is related to refraction, we have to think about the cornea first. And if we do not find any abnormalities in this structure, then we can think about the next one, which I already told you was the lens, right? So if you have a refraction disease, first of all, you have to think about the cornea, okay? So it has a great power of refraction, and it is, as we're going to see later on, the most important part of the diseases related to refraction. The cornea has a refraction index of 1.33, and this is this represents a refractive power that surrounds 40 dioptrics. In Spanish, dioptrías, right? So the cornea is actually related to 40 dioptrics. I'm going to, if you want me, later on we can talk about the dioptrics, okay? So it is responsible actually of two-thirds of the whole refraction of the eye, and the one remaining 1/3, which is remaining from the whole the whole concept, right? Which would be depending on the lens. So that's why I told you this is the most important structure related to refraction. So refraction is actually the property of a transparent medium, which has a curved surface, okay, to deviate or deflect the the light beams, as I told you, right? The light beams go through this medium, this transparent medium, which is roundy, right? And deviate or deflect the light beams. That only well, this only happens when this medium has a refraction index greater greater than the one that the atmospheric air has. And the atmospheric air has a refractive power of 1, okay? So the air we are breathing, right, has its own refractive power. which is 1.00, okay? So when there is any structure that deflects the light beams greater than the atmospheric air, we're talking that this structure has refractive power, okay? So the cornea works as a convex lens, right? Which focuses this light beam into the direction of the pupil. So deflects the light beams to make this light beam go through the pupil, through the pupil, okay? This structure has a roundy shape, which is almost perfect. However, its horizontal diameter is around 12 millimeters, and it is actually a little greater than the vertical diameter. And here, of course, we're talking about grown up, okay, and the medium grown up, okay. So this difference of diameters in the cornea makes us, well, explains a little problem that we all have. This is the root, the reason, the difference between both diameters, right? If the cornea was perfectly spherical, right, they would have, well, the cornea would have the same diameter in both. The horizontal and vertical would have to be the same. However, as you're seeing here, there's a tiny difference, and this little difference of 1 millimeter makes us well, is the reason of a physiological astigmatism. Okay, so we all have a little degree of astigmatism, which is physiological, which would mean normal, right? We all have a normal degree of astigmatism, which is related to the difference of diameters, the horizontal greater than the vertical diameter. So the cornea is a tissue which does not have any vessels. That's why this is actually transparent. Okay, so this is important because, I mean, the light beam has to go through it, right? So if the cornea had some blood vessels, the the light beam would be obstructed by these vessels, right? So that is why this structure, which is the cornea, does not have any blood vessels. So where does the cornea get? Where does the cornea get its nutrients? Well, it uses actually part of the oxygen, and that goes directly from the atmospheric air. And as you know, the surface of the eye is always covered or wrapped by a tear. You know what tear is, right? T-E-A-R. Can anybody tell me what tear means?
Lágrima.
Right. So it is always covered by a tear layer, right? So the oxygen, which is in the air, the atmospheric air, dissolves into the tears, and the oxygen and the nutrients also reach this tissue, which is the cornea, through the one liquid that we're going to talk about later on, okay? Which is in Spanish would be humor acuoso, right? So the cornea gets its nutrients through the atmospheric air and through this liquid. So the cornea, as I told you, is the most important part of the refractive power. It represents almost 40 dioptrics, okay? Here we have an refraction index of the structures that we're talking about. Here we have the cornea's refraction index, which is 1.33, and the lens has actually a greater refraction index. However, as I told you, the most important one is this one, right? The cornea. The the lens has a refraction index of 1.38. If we take a look at this, we would think that the lens has a greater refraction power, which is not actually completely true, as we're going to talk about it later on. Okay, so even though the cornea does not get any blood from any vessel, the cornea is highly innervated through the ophthalmic branch of the fifth cranial nerve. This is why actually, when the cornea gets damaged, for example, when people has chemical burns, or maybe burns inside a, a house that is burning down, okay, through this increase of the temperature, the cornea actually gets really damaged. So this, as I told you, this structure is highly innervated by this fifth cranial nerve, and as you know, this is actually sensitive, right? The fifth cranial nerve. So when this cornea is affected and it is highly innervated by this nerve, the diseases that are related to the cornea are really, really painful. So this tissue is composed by actually, if I don't know if I'm wrong, I think it has five main layers, just the cornea. Okay, so here you have the main layers, the five main layers of the cornea. From the outer to the inside are the epithelium, right? The epithelium, this one, the blue one. Then we have the Bowman's membrane or Bowman's layer, right? This one, this purple one, I think. Then we have the cements, sorry, the stroma, corneal stroma, right? The this one, this thicker one. Then we have the cements membrane, which is the green one here, and then we have the endothelium. So those are the five main layers of the cornea. Uh, we can get deeper into this kind of structure. So this, the epithelium is actually has a high renewal uh, potential. What does that mean? I mean, when there's some sort of damage here and does not reach any other deeper structures, the epithelium can easily make this damage go away. Okay, so when there is some sort of damage, it can be repaired very easily if it did not go through the Bowman's layer. So when it only reaches the epithelium, it can easily solve the problem, the epithelium, okay? It is so fast to solve this problem that if there's some sort of damage that only involves the epithelium, it could be renewed in almost just 3 hours. So it's really, really fast, right? Then we have the Bowman's membrane, which has a lot of collagen fibers. this one, right? It does not have a good renewal capacity. So when there is some sort of damage that reaches the Bowman's layer, it takes a lot more time than it would if there was only damage in the epithelium. Okay, and since this, as I told you, the cornea does not have any vessels, right? So it is really difficult to get a scar, right? Like to heal completely, because it does not have any blood vessels that would supply blood. And then we have the stromal core, stromal, the corneal stroma, right? Which is the thicker layer of all the five ones, and it actually represents around the 90% of the whole cornea. Then we have the cement membrane, which is a membrane that has a lot of collagen fibers. Also, this the green one, and it works as a basal membrane for the endothelium. So, what is the cement membrane? It's only a basal membrane for the next layer, which is the endothelium. And the endothelium is just the most internal layer of this external layer, actually, right? And it is important because these cells, the endothelial cells, can easily detect any change of osmolarity and some changes, especially in sodium and in some other molecules. Okay, and it is related actually to this liquid that we were talking about, right? Moracuoso, right? So the next one would be the sclera. The sclera, we're actually going to talk about the some other structures, which are the sclera, the episclera, and the conjunctiva. So the sclera, as you know, is the white part of the eye, right? It joins to the cornea, as I told you, in one point, which is actually, as I told you, the limbus, right? The sclerocorneal limbus. And it is constituted by connective tissue and collagen fibers, okay? So as I told you, the most anterior part of this external layer is represented, well, 1/6 part was represented by the cornea. So the other 5/6 parts of the external layer is represented by the sclera, right? So we have actually another like membrane, which is the episclera. Okay, this episclera is. Can anybody tell me what disease might affect the episclera and occasionally the sclera, but mainly the episclera? Does anybody know, for an extra point, guys? Especially those who are senior students, who are in their last year of the whole medicine school. Anybody? What would you think to if what would be the term if we're talking about the inflammation of the episclera?
Epiescleritis.
Great. And what is in English? What would it be like? You're right. Could you tell me in English? It's just the same. You can write it in the same way as in Spanish, and you have to turn it into an English word. So it would be, yeah,
Epiescleritis.
great. What kind of disease causes an inflammation of the episclera? So what kind of diseases could cause episcleritis? Okay, so we have, it's a really, really famous disease actually, which is the, in Spanish, arthritis rheumatoide, right? Rheumatoid arthritis. This disease might cause the inflammation of the episclera, okay? And as I told you, this external layer, both episclera and sclera, can get so damaged by this disease, which is the rheumatoid arthritis, right? That it could make a hole in this both structures. In Spanish would be episcleritis perforante or episcleritis perforans. Okay, that is quite interesting and important for you to know. Okay, so rheumatoid arthritis could cause episcleritis and the perforation of the episclera. Okay, so now let's get to the conjunctiva part. There are actually three types of conjunctiva, right? The bulbar conjunctiva, the tarsal conjunctiva, and the other one I don't quite remember. Sorry, guys. So here we have the bulbar conjunctiva, which is wrapping the sclera, right? Because the sclera is represented by well, is the whitey part of the eye, right? Above it, wrapping it, we have the bulbar conjunctiva. Okay. Of course, this one is like transparent, so we wouldn't see it unless we represent it here, as we see it here, right, in purple. And we have the palpebral, also known as bulbar conjunctiva. Okay, so we have some diseases that are related to both conjunctivas. However, the most usual one to be affected by any kind of disease is the bulbar conjunctiva, right? So, can anybody tell me what this would be? I mean, there's an inflammation of the which sort of conjunctiva? The bulbar one, right? Because the tarsal, uh, the bulbar is around the eye, right? As we see it here. And the palpebral conjunctiva will be uh, going to wrap the inner face of the eyelid, right? So this will be, what do you have, what do you get? Actually, how would you call this in Spanish?
Conjuntivitis.
Great. It would be conjunctivitis. Okay. In Spanish, that would be it, right? So that is the medical term, right? However, as you know, people who are not related to the medical field have their own diagnosis. I mean, they have their own terms to describe a disease, right? How would you call in how would a person who is not related to medicine describe this diagnosis? Does anybody know?
Conjuntivitis.
Yeah, that is actually the medical term. How
Ojos rojos.
you are going close to it. In English would be pink eye. Okay, so when you, I think you might have seen this kind of term in some TV series, especially sitcoms. I remember I heard about this in this sitcom, which is Friends, right? You know Friends, right? In one chapter, I don't know who just got a pink eye. Okay, so this pink eye in Spanish would be ojo rosado, ¿cierto? So that's how people who are not related to medicine describe this. Conjunctivitis for us, and for people who are not related to medicine, it would be a pink eye. Okay, so it would be conjunctivitis. That is mostly related to the bulbar conjunctiva, because there are some diseases that are related to palpebral conjunctiva. Okay, so when you maybe some professor of yours asks you what kind of conjunctiva is affected by for example, an allergic process or maybe infectious process, it would be the bulbar conjunctiva. Okay, so here we have another disease, or not disease, this is actually a sign. Okay, does anybody know what chemosis is? Chemosis. For an extra point, guys, does anybody know what chemosis is? Okay, so chemosis is actually just the edema, just this is just edema, okay, of the conjunctiva. That's how we call this. The edema of the conjunctiva is just called chemosis. Okay. I did not hear about this term until I was already a doctor, so don't feel bad. So here we have we're going to talk about some deeper, and the next layer actually would be the middle layer, right? Or vascular layer of the eye, which is composed by the iris, the ciliary body, and the choroid, right? So here we have, as you know, the middle layer of the eye is also known as vascular layer, right? And also it is also known as uvea. Okay, so the uvea has three, or middle layer is has three structures: the ciliary body, the iris, and the choroid. Okay, and here we have something else. We can divide the uvea or middle layer into anterior uvea, okay, which is formed by the ciliary body and the iris. Both together form the anterior uvea, and the choroid, the posterior uvea. Okay, how would you call um, how would you call the inflammation of the anterior and the inflammation of the posterior uvea? This is kind of difficult, actually. Okay, so what structures do we have here? In the anterior uvea, we have the ciliary body and the iris, right? So we have the iris, that is what we call the inflammation of the uvea, the anterior uvea, iridocyclitis. Okay, and the inflammation of the posterior uvea, which is only composed by the choroid, we have, well, this structure is actually posterior, right? And what do we have in the posterior part of the eye? The retina, right? So the inflammation of the posterior uvea, it is also related to the inflammation of the retina. That's why we call this inflammation of the posterior uvea chorioretinitis. Okay, inflammation of anterior uvea would be iridocyclitis, and the inflammation of the posterior uvea would be chorioretinitis. Okay, there's a disease actually which is called Beset disease, in Spanish, enfermedad de Beset or síndrome de Beset. You might already have read about it. Okay, this disease, can anybody tell me what kind of disease this is? Come on, guys. Okay, Behçet's disease is about the inflammation of vessels, blood vessels. So it would be a vasculitis. So Behçet's disease is a vasculitis. no, vasculitis, right? Is one sort, one type of vasculitis. Since we have this, what layer are we talking about? The middle or vascular layer, right? That's why Behçet's disease makes this vascular layer, it's composed by vessels, right? Makes these vessels, which are inside this layer, to swollen, to be inflamed. So since this disease is actually global in the eye, we will have a total uveitis, okay? That would include the anterior and posterior parts of the uvea or vascular layer, right? So Behçet's disease could cause total uveitis or complete uveitis, okay? So here we have, this is actually, well, the lens divides the whole eye into two main chambers, okay? Actually, there's a difference between chambers and cavities. Here we have the posterior cavity, which has the vitreous humor, and the anterior would have humor, aqueous humor, right? This is actually anterior, right? Sorry, there's a mistake here. So here we have the iris. The iris is a structure that divides the space between the cornea and the lens. So this, do you see this little blue line here? This is actually the iris, okay? So there's a space between the cornea, right, and the lens. And this structure, which is the iris, divides the anterior cavity. We have the anterior, sorry again for the mistake. This is the anterior cavity, right? Divides the anterior cavity into anterior and posterior chambers. We're going to take a closer look in our next slide, I think. Okay, so as I was telling you, I think it was in the first class, this structure, which is the iris, has three main layers, right? The epithelium, the stroma, and the double layer epithelium. I remember I told you about this one. The double layer epithelium has melanocytes, right? Which produce melanin, right? Which gives or provides the color to the eye, right? In the middle, pupil has a diameter from 2 to 4 millimeters. Okay, it also can vary according to the nervous stimulation that is predominating, right? So we have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic stimulation. Does anybody know what the sympathetic, let's get started with the sympathetic stimulation. What does the sympathetic stimulation do to the pupil? Come on, guys. You can tell me in Spanish, maybe, if anybody knows. I know that you know, guys. Here we have the pupil, right? It's like the black point of the eye. So this can vary in diameter according to the stimulation, either sympathetic or parasympathetic. For an extra point, guys, come on.
Contracción.
Sympathetic?
Yes.
It's actually the opposite, okay? Sympathetic causes to increase the diameter, okay? Sympathetic stimulation makes the pupil go wider, right? You know what wide is, right? Ancho, right? So sympathetic stimulation makes the pupil go wider. It's like it gets opened. And parasympathetic does the opposite. So it makes the pupil go smaller. Okay, and that action is, well, both actions, like make it bigger or smaller, or of course we're talking about the pupil, right? Well, both actions are related to two main muscles. I think, sorry, I do not have an extra slide. However, we have two muscles, which are the sphincter of the iris, okay? There are circular, of course, are circular fibers that are around the pupil, and the radial muscle of the iris, which, as its own name is telling us, it's radial, like has like this, right? The, the fibers are this way, like this, right? Okay, that would be the radial muscle of the iris. And for you to understand better, the other muscle, sorry, it was the green. Okay, the other muscle, which is the sphincter of the pupil, are around the fibers, go like this, okay? And the radial muscle of the iris go this way, the red ones. Okay, so I think you understood that because it's easy. So, so we're talking about the iris, right? So the iris forms an angle with the cornea. Well, here we have the anterior chamber, right? And the posterior chamber. Here we have the iris, okay? This is the iris. So as I told you, here we have an anterior cavity, which would be this whole thing, okay? And a posterior cavity. This is the black one, right? So the anterior cavity is divided by the iris into two main chambers, the anterior chamber, which is in yellow, and the posterior chamber, which is in green, right? So here we have this whole cavity, the anterior cavity, divided by the iris into anterior and posterior chambers. Here's, as you can see here, we have an angle right here, okay? You see the pointer, right? The green pointer. I'm going to change it into red for you to see it better. So here we have this angle, which is the iridocorneal angle. Irido from iris, right? This one. And cornea would be this one, right? So iridocorneal angle. This is the iridocorneal angle in which occurs the draining of the aqueous humor. Okay, here we have aqueous humor and we have vitreous humor. Anterior cavity is related to aqueous humor and posterior cavity is related to vitreous humor. So in this angle, the iridocorneal angle, occurs the drainage of the aqueous humor. Okay, how does this liquid gets drained? Okay, there is a net of like little canals, like little tubes, right? And a main one, which is the Schlemm canal. You remember, right, from anatomy, Schlemm's canal? So, sorry, well, here I have this, the muscles, right, that we were talking about. I didn't remember I had this slide. So the sphincter, right? The sphincter and the radial muscles. As I told you, remember here we have the roundy fibers, which are related to the sphincter, and the radial fibers that are related to the radial muscles, right? And here we have them. Okay. So as I was telling you, sorry, here. So here we have the cornea, right? Cornea, and here we have, where is it? The iris. So here is the iris and the cornea, right? And here we have the angle that I was telling you about, the iridocorneal angle, right? And here we have, if you can see it, there are a lot of mm, holes, right? Like points that they're actually holes through which the aqueous humor, which is in the anterior cavity, go through this holes and connect into the Schlemm's canal, which is the main one here. So there is a disease in which this drainage does not occur. Can anybody tell me the name of this disease? It is really famous. Come on, guys, I know that you know. For an extra point, for 2 extra points, 3 extra points, anybody?
I'm
Come.
sorry, what was the question?
Okay, there's a disease. Well, you understood, right? That here in the anterior cavity, we have one liquid, which is the aqueous humor, right? And the aqueous humor has to drain through this canal, which is the Schlemm's canal. Actually, this is a system of drainage and drain into a big canal, which is the Schlemm's canal here. There is a disease in which this drainage of the aqueous humor does not occur. What is the name of this disease?
Glaucoma.
Great, yes. So we got to 3 points. Who was that?
Danitza Virgo.
Okay, Danitza. 3 extra points for you. Okay. Yes, so when the drainage of this aqueous humor does not happen here at the iridocorneal angle through the Schlemm's canal, is called glaucoma. Okay, it is quite uh, famous, right? So as you can see, there's a lot of structures that are related to certain diseases, right? And there's actually 2 types of glaucoma, right? Open angle glaucoma and closed angle glaucoma. In Spanish, glaucoma de ángulo abierto, glaucoma de ángulo cerrado. And when we refer to angle, we're talking about this angle, the iridocorneal angle, okay? So, as you can see here, glaucoma, since this drainage of the aqueous humor does not happen, so increase the volume of the aqueous humor makes the inner pressure of the eye to increase, right? And that is glaucoma. So the main clinical manifestation of glaucoma would be pain, right? They say it's really, really painful. It is actually one of the ophthalmological emergencies, actually. And closed angle glaucoma is an ophthalmological emergency, okay? Next, we have the ciliary body, which is like a thicker portion of this layer, which is between the iris and the choroid. Okay, anteriorly we have the sclerocorneal limbus, and posteriorly we have the ora serrata. Can anybody tell me what the ora serrata is? Okay, so what does this word sound to you like, cerrada, in Spanish? Because this word actually comes from Latin, so it would be more related to Spanish rather than in English. Anybody? In Spanish, what does cerrada means or sounds like? Sierra, right? This object we use for or to cut wood, for example. So sierra, okay? Serrata comes from sierra in Latin, okay? How do we call this item in English? There's actually a movie, a horror movie that is quite famous. You must have seen Saw, right? So Saw means sierra in Spanish, okay? So serrata comes from this word. Why is it called this way? Because this or serrata is actually the most anterior part of the retina. And it is called serrata because it has this form, this shape. Okay, it's like a saw, right? Sierra, similar on a sierra. So this ora serrata is like the most anterior part of the retina. However, we know that the retina is a posterior structure. So the most posterior part of the ciliary body is related to the most anterior part of the retina, which is the ora serrata. I think I have an extra. No, I don't. However, you can imagine, right? So here we have the ciliary body, which is uh, this would be anterior, this would be posterior, right? And here we have the retina, right? And the most anterior part of the retina is the ora serrata. And the most posterior part of the ciliary body is related to the most anterior part of the retina, which is the ora serrata, right? Easy to understand. And we're almost done, guys. Here we have the lens. So what does the lens do? Uh, it increases the refractive power of the cornea. As I told you, it is related to refractive power, right? So it deflects light, just like the cornea, right? I told you that the cornea was related to 40 dioptrics. On the other hand, the lens is related to 20 dioptrics. Okay, it represents 1/3 of the refractive power of the whole eye. Okay, in a grown-up, an adult, this structure, which is the lens, in Spanish would be cristalino or lente, right? Has a vertical diameter of 9 millimeters approximately and a thickness of 4 millimeters. However, according to the distance between the observer and the object that deflects the light and makes it go through our eyes, it can the diameter of the lens can vary just 1 millimeter. Okay, so when an object is closer to you, this structure gets thicker, plus 1 millimeter. And when the object is far from you, let's say, for example, 1 block away from you, it would have just 4 millimeters. Okay, so it depends, the diameter depends on how close you are to the object you are looking at, okay? So, as you can see, there's a lot of information. We just talked about with the basics of the eye and some diseases. So guys, we're going to have the poll, okay? Well, before that, does anybody have a question about pronunciation mainly, or any terms that you might not have understood? Okay, there's a lot of info, right? Because there are a lot of structures, kind of difficult to pronounce, and even in Spanish, they're kind of tricky. So if you have any questions, we'll save them for our next class. And let's get started with the survey or poll, okay? Let me know when you're done. We're having two polls today, okay? The daily poll and another one. Okay, so let's get started.
I'm done.
Thank you. Okay. Uh, and this one, please.
I'm done.
Okay, thank you guys. I think you are all done. Yeah, 7 out of 7. Okay, thank you. Before you leave, sorry. Before you leave, I'm going to take a picture of people who are here for attendance purposes. Give me 1 second, please. You already had to deal with me for a whole hour. Okay. Okay. Thank you, guys. On Monday, we may be having 2 hours of theoretical classes, just like today, so we can have our practice class on Tuesday with a lot of more topics. So before you leave, I would like to ask you, or maybe we will do it in the WhatsApp group. I will ask you to choose some subjects to talk about each specialty that we did not talk about yet. Okay, we'll do it in the WhatsApp group. Okay, thank you guys. See you on Monday, and tomorrow you are. Well, there is Christmas. Yes, thank you, Paula. Merry Christmas to all of you guys. You are great students. You're going to be awesome doctors. And well, best of all wishes for you and your families. Have a good night tomorrow, and I'll see you on Monday. Okay, take care, guys.
Merry Christmas. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Merry
You
Christmas.
too. Merry Christmas. Bye.
Bye, guys. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Goodbye.